description. You're a real one for that.
Yo, guys, what is going on? You already know me, host of the Pistons Talk Podcast. My name's Anthony. I do have a very special guest today. Feels like it's been a year in the making. Scheduling conflict, obviously. Got Jeff Iafrate from the Crunch Time Podcast. Brother, what is going on?
Well, nothing. No, I'm just kidding. A lot of stuff. Last week has been hectic. I'm happy to be here. You're a good friend of mine, and we've been trying to do this for a while, but I'm happy we've been able to finally do it. But yeah, it started a new pod. You guys can check that out. Crunch Time with Jeff Iafrate and Booner. We do content every day. We're live every day, 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. On top of that, I got From Half Court with Sean Murphy. But just staying busy, man. Staying busy. I'm able to make an appearance. You're crushing it. So let's get this started.
I'm happy I finally got you on. I remember the last time I tried to get you on, you're like, yeah, bro, like my car, like my axles fell off my car. I was like, oh shit.
Yeah, that was real. Like that sounds like a bullshit. Like it was. I'm driving on the road, wheel just flies off the vehicle. I've never had that happen before. Actually, Nick Lee, shout out to him. I texted him immediately, and he's like, "How the fuck did the axle come completely off your vehicle?" I don't know. This shit just happens to me, man. I don't get it. I don't understand it. Struck by lightning.
Yeah, for sure, man. Look, that's absolutely insane. I'm glad we actually can do this podcast now because, like I told you, when we were working at Woodward, I wanted to start a Pistons podcast with you. Shout out to Sean Murphy. He beat me to it. You son of a bitch, Sean. Love you. But shout out to Half Court. I know Sean's doing great things over there when he does have time to make the videos. I know he's a busy guy like myself. But you guys can find Jeff's new podcast, Crunch Time. I am not a football guy by any means. I tell you guys all the time. I'm a casual when it comes to football. I watch the show because it's funny. They make fun of each other. They roast each other. You know, the chat's fun. It's a good experience if you just want to watch, four guys just constantly talk football and get sidetracked and argue with each other like it's First Take. Absolutely love it, though. But you can find all their socials if you want to go support them down there. Wanted to get, into this podcast, obviously. And I don't know if you've been watching Pistons games. I don't know if you've been able to watch as many Pistons games, obviously, working a lot, starting your new podcast. But wanted to ask you, why do you think the season has been such a failure under this team, which we thought were going to win like 30 games? I know I did. I had, Chris on this week. He said like 40 games. Like, why do you think it's been so bad?
It's a great question. It's a complex question. I think there's a lot of things that go into it. It's funny, before the season, Lindsey Hunter, shout out to him, by the way, I love Lindsey, but he believed this team could make the playoffs without any additions. This was like during the offseason, last offseason. And I'm like, okay, Lindsey, like maybe. I thought 30 games was realistic. Hell, they won 6 and we're in February. So a lot of things have gone wrong. I think a mix of, number one, I feel bad for Monty Williams. I think that's where my heart goes. I mean, you could criticize him all you want. I just think we all, Pistons fans, Pistons media, we kind of overrated the players they currently have and maybe some of the players that were supposed to take a jump. Cade Cunningham, undoubtedly, he's been excellent to start the season. I know he's just coming off an injury. But he had injuries throughout the season, and there's not a lot of room for error with this team. I mean, they are up there in the NBA in turnovers, and they barely force turnovers. And you're terrible on defense, and they're not great on offense. Like it's a complete disaster. Now, you see the addition of Mike Muscala and Danilo Gallinari and what they've done. I mean, they're still on like a 4-game losing streak, but for a minute there, they looked better with veterans. This team just has a ton of youth, man. It's a problem. Like the Zach LaVine stuff, and I got Zach LaVine out with an ankle surgery, which that's a whole nother thing I'm sure we'll get into eventually because I think that's a good thing for the Pistons, to be honest with you, that he is no longer an option. It's bad. I've had to defend Troy Weaver. Now at this point, it's over. I mean, Troy is getting fried, and I think this trade deadline is hard because he spent time clearing all this cap space. But Anthony, who are you getting? Like, there's no help coming. Like, I don't know how this thing gets better. Like, you look at the roster and how it's currently constructed, it's a disaster. Like, it's an absolute disaster. And you got Killian Hayes asking for a trade now, so apparently that's news. Even though he's getting DNPs.
We're definitely going to get into Zach LaVine because there's so much to get into there with the reporting and obviously having surgery. Definitely going to get into Killian Hayes because why not? People think I hate Killian Hayes. I think I'm a Killian Hayes hater. I'm not. I just tell the truth. And I don't know, maybe the truth is hard for some people. They live in a bubble.
It's true.
But I think what you said, like, maybe we kind of overrated the players that we had. Absolutely agree with that. I think sometimes when we watch our team and we're so involved, and there's some people out there like myself where they don't watch any other basketball teams. They're just strictly Detroit Pistons. And, sometimes maybe the media hypes it up a little bit. The media was, saying, oh, Pistons are going to go get Cam Johnson. No, we got Joe Harris and like Monte Morris, but I absolutely love Monte Morris. It's more of a Joe Harris slander, who doesn't play, and he's on a $19 million expiring. Like, I think there's so many things that went wrong this season. I think rotations with Monty Williams, he's very stubborn. We've seen that, you put the ball in Jaden Ivey's hands a little bit and he can score. Like, Marcus Sasser's getting more playing time now.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's just been so much you could point to why it's gone wrong. And it's just like, you go down the list and it's like, man, I don't think they were ready for a coach like Monty Williams, in my opinion. I think they needed a younger guy. Like, I was advocating for Kevin Ollie, Charles Lee, Jaron Collins. I thought like an assistant like that, or a first-time coach like Kevin Ollie, maybe you don't get to the playoffs, but maybe instead of going from 17 to 25, that's progress. And maybe they're not at a 6 win. Maybe they're like at a 15-game clip right now if they bring in one of those assistants that can maybe relate to them because they're a little bit younger and relate to them on like a human level and a basketball level as well. But I just think Monty Williams, to me, he's a vets coach. I've never really viewed him as like a young player development coach like I did with Dwayne Casey.
Yeah, and especially for Monty. I mean, you saw Monty in his first year in Phoenix to his second year. Like, they drastically improved, but really what took them over the top was getting Chris Paul, who's an extension of a coach on the floor. Like, they don't have that. Like, it's youth everywhere, and that's a problem. Like, even in the start. And by the way, your point about the minutes is spot on. Like, why the hell is James Wiseman seeing the floor at all? Like, that is a whole nother. Like, that's a whole nother. They have like 7 guys in a bench rotation. Like that's too many. Like, if you haven't figured out, and I know the bench is, to some extent been a little overrated, but if you haven't figured out a rotation now in February, like there's a problem. And that's been the case. Like, they're playing too many guys off the bench. Like, Sasser should have already cemented himself in the rotation, but no. I mean, Jaden Ivey, and he's been playing well over the last 10 games. He's averaging almost 20 points, 24-4. Like, he's playing really well.
Yeah, we talked about last week where the way I see it, maybe, I overreact to everything, but I don't see the veterans getting called out during press conferences. I see Jaden Ivey constantly called out. Like, the younger guys that you're supposed to lift up and develop, you're calling them out for every little thing. And to your point, like, yeah, if you don't have your rotation set in my opinion, by like December, you should know what your rotations are. You shouldn't need a quote unquote organizational meeting to say, hey, I just drafted Jaden Ivey 5th overall. He needs to play. Nothing against Killian Hayes. I just think you could play both of them if you wanted to. But to me, I think Killian should have always been an emergency like backup point guard. Like, I much would rather have seen Marcus Sasser play a bulk of the backup point guard minutes until Monte Morris had come back this season. But I get it. Monty likes those tall guards that are defensive, and Killian doesn't make a whole lot of mistakes because he doesn't really shoot the ball. He just passes every little time. So he doesn't make a whole lot of mistakes or turnovers. So I get it from that standpoint, but I just think the season as a whole, it's a wash. I haven't even got into the draft this year because I'm just like, I know we're getting 5th. Like, it's just so depressing.
I'm so mad. I don't want to cover the 5th overall draft pick. I have no interest. Like, speaking of the 5th overall pick, like, what's frustrating me the most, I think, this season with the Asar Thompson storyline is in the beginning, he's starting, he's playing a ton of minutes, you're losing, but you're seeing his development. You're seeing him as a defender. You're seeing his upside. You're like, man, this guy defensively is great. Now shooting is a whole nother thing. And now we're in February and he's coming off the bench. It's like, what? What are we doing? If I signed up, and I think other Pistons, if you're going to win 6 games through all the way to February now, you better lose with the players you plan to have throughout the next 5 years. I don't want to see Kevin Knox in the starting line. I don't want to see Mike Muscala starting at the 4. Like, I have no interest in that. Duran's development has been great. But the Asar Thompson, and you mentioned it earlier with Ivey. Like, it seems, and I'm reading more quotes coming out of press conferences, and I know, Ivey's family is not fond of it either, and I don't blame him. Like, I don't blame them. It's frustrating to see, especially for Ivey's playing so well, and he played well early in the season, but he's young. Like, he's going to make mistakes, and it seems like he's taking, at least when he gets brought up, it's like these it's passive aggressive comments towards Ivey that I don't understand. So for me, if I'm going to win 6 games through February, it better be with the 5 or 4, at least, because you start looking for a 4, the 4 that you see as the future. Like, there's no reason why Asar should be playing minutes off the bench. When he's one of their best, they're probably their best perimeter defender, and they're one of the worst teams defensively. Like, how does that make any sense?
Yeah, there was a graphic that Bally put out where, like, when he's off the bench versus on the bench, and like the net rating was over +10. Like you just said, his defense alone impacts it. But it's like I could get into debates about Monty Williams' rotations until I'm blue in the face, and I think I'll just be miserable. But to say that this season has been underwhelming would be, I think, an overstatement in my opinion.
And you know what's funny about the rotation stuff? It sounds like Dwayne Casey all over again. Remember, we were criticizing Dwayne for his rotation, and now it's the same thing year 1 of Monty. And I don't want to. I think your point you made about Monty being the coach, you put the cherry on top when the dessert's made, right? When this team's constructed, then you bring in a Monty. I think you're right. I don't know if Monty, although I think he's a good coach, and that's why I brought up the CP3 point. I don't know if this is the right roster right now for a guy like Monty. Like, you're going to have to bring in, and I don't know where you go get these guys, but you're going to have to significantly upgrade this team to have any hope that Monty can put together a 40-win season. Like that and I don't know how you do it this offseason. I don't. Even if you have the 5th overall pick, like, this draft, at least from what I've read, isn't like it's been in prior years. And I know that's said every year, but I don't know how to fix it. Like, this is the first season in a little bit here where I've been sitting here going, okay, there's a problem. How do we fix it? I don't have the solution. Like I don't know how Troy's going to figure it out, because it seems like there's too many cooks in the kitchen anyway in the front office. And I don't know how much, control Troy has anyway. Yeah. So I don't know. Like, I wish I had more hope for Pistons fans. There's barely any to be told. Just Cade Cunningham, who, if I'm him and I'm his team, if this keeps up the way it is, I don't blame them for being like, man, we got to get you out of here. Like, we got to get you out of here, because your career is going to be smeared early on, like, just because of the organization you're a part of. And I love the Pistons, but it sucks to say it. I mean, it does.
Yeah, you look at the free agents, and it's like a lot of Pistons fans had your wish board for Pascal Siakam. That's obviously not going to happen. No. They had a wish board of OG Anunoby. It's not going to happen.
No.
You look at the top free agents. Like, are you getting James Harden? Probably not. Getting Paul George? No. Do you really want to throw the bag at Klay Thompson at this stage of his career? Probably not. You're going to get some mid-tier guys. And to your point, like, Chris Paul was a big reason why Phoenix took a big leap in the wins. Because you can go back and look at their record when Monty was coaching them. They were a lottery team. Apparently, like, I know Chris Pilati said this last week, you just need a Hall of Fame point guard to turn this around, and we'll be back to the promised land. But
that's it. That's all you need.
I think it will get better. I'm scared shitless over these next 4 days of what's going to happen. I don't know if they're going to turn their attention to players like Tobias Harris, who's going to be a UFA. Maybe I mentioned it earlier. Andrew Wiggins seems like just the type of player that they would target. Not like an A+ player, but like a solid, like B- player that could help out the defense a little bit. But he's been god awful this year for the Golden State Warriors. I think he's still grieving over the stuff that happened with his father. I don't know if his father passed away or not. I think he got sick or something like that the last time I read it. But there's just so many avenues they could go down, and it scares me because I haven't seen them be aggressive since Troy Weaver's first year as a GM. Like, his first year as GM, I thought was his best year as a GM.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
I just haven't seen that type of aggressiveness. I haven't seen that same type of the same types of moves that he was making, like, flipping Luke Kennard so he get Sadiq Bey, trading up to get Isaiah Stewart, drafting, Killian Hayes, obviously, who was a 7th overall pick, and a lot of people were high on him at that time. Some people in the comments will probably say they weren't high on him. I mean, from the consensus, most Pistons fans were pretty high on Killian Hayes. I fell victim to that. I have a Killian Hayes jersey in my closet, and I'm not too I will admit that.
It makes two of us.
Yeah.
That makes two of us.
I bought into the hype. Damn you, Kevin O'Connor.
Yeah. But to your point, though, about Troy Weaver, it seems like the last year or so, because even, forget me, Jalen Duren, he flipped that pick from Jeremy Grant. Like, you go and get Jalen Duren. Now we're like, hell yeah. Like, now you're being aggressive. You're building a young core. But it seemed like over the last year, it's been, and it spoke volumes in the offseason when you trade for a Joe Harris and a Monty Morris. It's like, I like the core we have now. And that goes back to the point we made about, did we severely overrate this core? Because this team isn't doing anything until guys take significant steps forward. And Cade Cunningham is already putting up, if they're winning games, he's putting up close to all-star numbers. So he's probably the last issue of concern. Ivey's looked better. But even for Duren, Asar, the players that surround them, like, you're going to have to, and maybe you can't go out and get to Chris's proposal there, love it, Hall of Fame point guard. Maybe that's not on one of the options, but maybe you can start building around these guys. But at the end of the day, Anthony, it comes down to how much can these guys take the next step? Like, what does Jaden Ivey look like next year? Is he finally a 20-point scorer next to Cade Cunningham? Is Asar Thompson, can he be a 30%, just 30% three-point shooter? Like, can Duren be consistent in what he's been doing? Like, because he's been an animal. I mean, he didn't get a double-double this game, but he's been a 20-20 walking 10-10 guy for the last couple of weeks now. He's been great this season. Like, at the end of the day, the success falls on those guys' shoulders. Like, no one's coming to save this team. Tobias Harris will not save this roster. He's not saving next season. Like, those are complementary players at the end of the day. Like, that's just what they are. They're fourth options on good teams.
Yeah, and I think that's the route they're going to go. And it's sad because I thought last summer was the summer to have cap space. I thought there were guys out there, like, I thought if you wanted to take a flyer in Harrison Barnes, I would be okay with it. Like, guys like Kyle Kuzma were available, Cameron Johnson, like I mentioned earlier. Like, right. There were some guys out there that I thought, like, yeah, you could take a flyer on a Kelly Oubre maybe for a year, or a Torrey Craig. But they didn't do anything. And, you hear guys like Arn Tellem, who makes business decisions in the front office, saying, like, hey, we didn't feel like there was a guy out there that really moved the needle. And for me, like, I don't understand that. Like, all those guys that I mentioned could help you in the win column and help you develop these young guys that we have. Like, we have veterans on this team, but they're not vetting. Like, right. They're like Alec Burks is getting his buckets. Bojan is getting his buckets, but they're not like vetting. Like, I go back, and I don't know how old you were during the SVG era. They traded a draft pick of the name of Tony Mitchell. I don't know if that name rings a bell.
Yep. I remember Tony Mitchell. Yep. And
we traded for an unknown name of Anthony Tolliver. And Anthony Tolliver came into this organization. He was a perfect vet for the young guys. And the Pistons start going on this winning streak. And the reason why I mentioned that is, like, you can get pretty decent vets on the cheap. There's guys like Tony Snell right now that, like, needs a job. Like, Tony Snell would be a perfect vet for this team. He might not get the Pistons a whole lot of wins, but he's a 3-and-D wing that Asar Thompson can learn from. Like, these guys, at the end of the day, they need veterans that have played this game and they can help them win. And I think right now we have veterans. They're just not the vets that I think that can elevate this team to the next level. Like, they don't have a veteran center that Jalen Duren, Isaiah Stewart, or James Wiseman can learn from right now. They just don't. Like, Marvin Bagley, for all intents and purposes, was supposed to be that vet, but they dealt him for Muscala and Gallinari, which I get why they did it. They wanted more cap space. They didn't want to pay that $12 million. But I think a goal for them this year is try to find a veteran center to teach these guys. Like, you need legitimate veterans to help these players learn how to win, because they don't know, like, they're talented, but they just don't know how to execute games. They don't know how to close games. Like, they need real veterans to help them understand the game of basketball at the end of the day.
Yeah, you need an extension of Monty Williams on the court, like, but also to your point, that plays a similar position than some of the guys. Like when they brought in Danilo and Mike Muscala, I mean, like to your point, they're vets, but they're not willing teaching vets. Like to the point of an Anthony Tolliver, a guy that comes on the team and he's at a point in his career where it's more we versus me. Like you still have guys, you have vets like Alec Burks is still playing really well. Like he's 1 years old. Like he can go help out a contender right now. He's not at a point of his career where I don't think he's as interested in just sitting here and helping the young guys grow. Like he's got to get his, and I don't blame him. But you're right. Like they need and maybe not a Chris Paul, it would be likely, but somebody to come out here and at least slow the game down for everybody. Like it's a great point you made about the Jalen Duren thing, because they had James Wiseman backing up Jalen Duren, like in Marvin Bagley. Those were their bigs. Like that's a problem. Like now they got Mike Muscala as like the mentor, but how much of a mentor? And they don't even play the same way. Like it's not even a good fit there. So yeah, I think you're right there. Like they need a willing veteran that can help kind of slow these guys down. That can call a players only meeting, no Monty, and be like, listen, guys, we got to get our shit together. Like this is bad, and they just don't have that right now. They don't.
Yeah, like I was calling for JaVale McGee years ago because I felt like
he's
the type of veteran center that he's an NBA champion, great rim protector, great rim runner. But those are the type of vets that I'm looking at. Like you don't have to go out and get like the stars, because I don't think you're a destination where you can attract stars yet until you start winning.
Right.
But those are the types of vets I think that the Pistons do need to target. But it's like I said, it's a mess. Like the game today, they competed their ass off, but again, it's turnovers at the end of the day. They don't know how to close a game. They don't know how to execute. They're like ticky-tacky turnovers where, Jaden Ivey had a couple tonight where, he got into the lane and he tried to like those no-look passes, which, they look great on a highlight reel, but you got to kind of slow down and let the game come to you. But I think they'll get better. It's just they need the right types of vets, and they need to be utilized in the right way too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, turnovers have been a problem. It just has, even with Cade. I mean, I know Cade's been a little better coming back from injury with the turnovers, but even before then, like he was consistently turning the ball over 4 to 5 times a game. And it's kind of similar. And I see this comment here. Organic Lindo put the Fred VanVleet signing in Houston. That is like. It is like a discount, maybe a dollar store in a way, Chris Paul, where like he's won a championship. He's a respected point guard, and he came to Houston and it changed things. Look at what it's done for. I know Jalen Green still isn't. He's still inefficient, which I think that's just Jalen Green. But still, like he's done a lot for that squad. Like that's what they're missing. And now it's different because you have a young backcourt. So if you do bring in another a veteran guard, do you move? Cade to the 3. I don't know how they would like to work that out, but just seeing what Fred has done in Houston, that's a perfect situation to kind of look at and be like, yeah, look what they did this offseason. Like a Dylan Brooks, another guy. He hasn't won anything, but he's vocal. He'll call guys out. He makes sure guys are doing their job. Like they don't have that. They don't. And it's not all about having a ring either. Because CP3 didn't have a ring either. So like it's just about a guy that just played a lot of basketball and gets it.
Yeah, I mean that's why you see Orlando. They're like actively looking to add Kyle Lowry and CP3 because Orlando wants to take that next step. They're a young team that I think you look at it. They started rebuilding the same time as the Detroit Pistons. The only caveat to that is they had more assets to fast track their rebuild, where the Pistons didn't. But those are the type of vets that they're looking for. They're looking for older veteran point guards to help. Markelle Fultz and Jalen Suggs, teach them, how to win, how to close out games, because they have playoff aspirations, much like the Houston Rockets. Like Houston got clowned for their offseason. People are like, oh my God. Like I remember seeing Pistons fans like, oh, it's Ben Gordon, Charlie V all day. Doesn't look like it. Doesn't look like it at all. They're another team that started their rebuild, much like the Pistons. Again, they had assets to start off. And I'm not using that as an excuse. It's the truth.
The truth.
But I think those are the type of vets. If this team wants to get better, you have to add more veterans to teach these kids how to win. And, you can bring in veterans and they can still develop. I think some people when they see like a veteran, like I had mentioned Aaron Wiggins on Twitter, and people are like, oh, what happens to Asar then? Asar won't get playing time. I was like, that's not really the point.
No.
You have to bring in veterans to help these kids develop, because there's only so much a coach can do. Like bringing in like an Andrew Wiggins, this is an example. Like imagine the battles they would have in practice. Like that's why you bring in veterans, so they can get better each and every day, whether that's practice, whether that's, just watching the game from the bench. Like I think that's the way the Pistons can get better. But we can go to the next topic because we spent almost a half hour on this topic. Which
there's so much more that we can
there's so much more we can get into. I did want to talk about Zach LaVine though, because this Zach LaVine saga stuff over the past couple of days, we had heard that Zach LaVine to Detroit was a real thing, and that came from Zach Lowe on his podcast, saying that the Pistons and the Bulls, that this could possibly happen over the next couple of days. We learned today from Casey Johnson that Bojan Bogdanovic and Joe Harris were names that the Bulls were asking for. And we all know Zach LaVine, Clutch Sports, Rich Paul, they got involved. They say, you know what, Zach, they're going to send you to Detroit. Do you want to go there, or do you want to have season-ending surgery? Obviously, if you look at the optics, he elected for surgery versus coming to the Detroit Pistons. Don't know that to be true in terms of him saying, like, I'd rather have surgery than go to Detroit. No one has, come out and said that. But, I mean, you can kind of, like, look at everything that's transpired over the past, like, 2-3 days.
Yeah.
My question to you is, were you on the Zach LaVine train? Were you trying to talk yourself into it, saying like, hey, this is a 25-5-5 guy, former all-star, a player that could pair next to Cade Cunningham and take more pressure off of him? Were you in that camp, or you were just strictly against it because you saw that $250 million contract and he's 28 years old? Yeah,
there you go. And it's hard because, I mean, especially for Pistons fans and just Pistons media, you don't really have the right to sit here and be like, I'm okay with the Zach LaVine, not trading for Zach LaVine. But at the same time, it was me talking myself into it, because when he's under contract to like 2025, 2026 or something like that, he's got like a player option. So that's, and it's for like $40+ million. But the other part of that is for Zach LaVine, to me, he's a needle mover given they won 6 games. But if you put Zach LaVine on a championship team, what option would you think he'd be? Like, let's be real here. I would think Zach on a championship team would be like a third option. That's where I would lean on a good squad.
Yeah, and I think that's why the Lakers. I know Adrian Wojnarowski, when he was talking about this last month, he said, the Lakers view him as like a third option next to Anthony Davis and LeBron.
Perfect.
And they don't like that contract. And I think that's another thing. I think a lot of Pistons fans, they look at it like, dude, like, he's an all-star. He can get you 30 on any given night. That's not why Pistons fans, I don't want to label all Pistons fans, but a majority of Pistons fans on Twitter, they're looking at the contract and the last year of his contract. It's like $48 million. And if you do want to move him, he has a trade kicker on top of that. Like, shout out to Rich Paul and Clutch Sports. Like, those contracts are airtight.
Yeah.
Like, he got paid. And I think that's the Bulls' fault. The Bulls didn't have to give him that 5-year deal. They didn't have to do that. And you watch the Bulls, they look a lot better with Colby White running the show.
Says a lot, don't it?
And he's making 10 times less than Zach LaVine is. So,
yeah. And I don't want this to be like because we didn't get him. No, this is how we've, and I know you felt this way, but with LaVine, number one, this team needs, they need to be better defensively. Zach LaVine doesn't solve that. And the other thing is, if you go out and trade for Zach LaVine, I don't know what the trade package would consist of, but to me, this feels, and I have to watch here because I do have a found respect for this player when he was traded, but a Blake Griffin-esque type of deal where you're in desperation mode, you go trade for a prior all-star, and they both have had injury issues. Now, Zach LaVine over the last couple of years has been healthy, but you look at the start of his career, he's missed a ton of games, and he's going to miss a majority of this season now. So it smells like a trap. He'd be tied up to a contract where it'd be hard to get rid of him. So I know it sounds crazy, a team that's won 6 games, to say no to Zach LaVine, but it really is true. Like it is very, very true. I think the Pistons, they saved themselves a little bit here just by this. And I know Zach LaVine, I truly think he had no interest to come to Detroit. I don't know what the reports say. I think part of me is thinking like, no way, no, I'm going to Detroit. And I think it's best for both parties that way. I do.
I know a lot of Pistons fans on Twitter today are like, Troy can't make the deal. You answered my prayers, like whatever. Because I know people, whether it's on YouTube, whatever social media platform, they're funny as hell. Like some of the stuff I read has me dying all day. I know you mentioned Blake Griffin, and I think when you look at it contract wise, you could make that parallel. But what I would say to that is, I think when Blake came here, Blake was like, all right, I'm the captain now. This is my team. He put the team on his back, had his best year statistically throughout his career. The Pistons were a 6 seed at one point.
Yep.
Blake was scoring 25 a night. I don't know if you trade Zach LaVine, he has that same mindset.
No.
Because throughout his career, he hasn't really been that alpha that it's my team now. When they brought in DeMar DeRozan and Nikola Vucevic, you read articles of him being upset that it was a tight game and he didn't get the basketball down the stretch. Like, to me, like when I read stuff like that, I don't want that going into a young, rebuilding Detroit Pistons locker room with guys like Cade Cunningham and Jaden Ivey that are very impressionable right now because they're still very young. I don't want them feeling some type of way and neglected because you have a guy that has a really big ego thinking he needs his 25 touches a night and he needs to be averaging 30. And if he's not scoring 30, he's upset. But, if he scores 12 in a win, he's pouting, I think culture wise, to me, I look at the talent's there, but I think contract wise, the stuff you read about him being upset when he doesn't get the ball, if it's a tight game, just think there's a lot. I would go down the list and kind of like put an extra, like, yeah, I don't need that on my basketball team right now. I get it. He was a name, but I think it's a big red flag that you were the only suitor for Zach LaVine out of all the NBA teams in the NBA, especially with the new CBA and, the way contracts are. I think it was a red flag that you were the only team that was actually betting. Like, you should look to your left, look to your right, and you don't see another team betting for you. It's probably not a good deal.
And your point about Blake Griffin, I agree. I think Blake's leadership clears Zach LaVine, clears him by a mile. And that we just got done talking about how this team needs more veteran leadership. I think Zach LaVine, you'd be moving backwards. Like Blake Griffin, you remember in his tenure too, like he had a career year, but there was games where he'd have 14, 8, and 8, they'd win. And you see Blake, he has no problem with it. Like I think Blake, the difference is too, Blake makes other players, especially at that point in time, made other players better. Zach LaVine is not going to do that. And I don't think what Zach LaVine brings to the table besides scoring solves any issues like that they currently have. I just don't. And you have guys that you think are going to be better scorers that are going to take the next step. I just don't. I think Zach LaVine would stunt the growth of guys like Cade and Ivey and the rest of the guys. I just do. So I think at the same time, like I said, I think they kind of avoided a potential bad situation. And you're spot on with that. Like if you're the only potential suitor, something's wrong. Like Zach LaVine, I think it's a blessing in disguise that he's not coming to Detroit. I think the Pistons got away, and they'll be better off. Yeah, I know it sounds crazy, but they will be.
I mean, the asking price for him, I think, was pretty low. It even got to the point where they're reading reports that the Bulls were willing to attach, guys like Patrick Williams, who I know a lot of Pistons fans were in the draft process. They were really high on him out of Florida State. They're willing to attach guys to get off his contract. So to me, it's another red flag. Like, you're willing to part ways with a young, promising player just to get off his contract because they're having buyer's remorse right now. And I understand that. The Lonzo Ball stuff that happened with them, it's really sad because I remember you and Adam talking about it when you guys were on the Morning Woodward show. Like, you guys were talking about like, hey, can the Bulls like get to the Eastern Conference Finals? Because there was a time where, the Bulls were like a top 4 team in the East.
Yep.
But obviously the stuff that happened with Lonzo, who knows if he'll ever play basketball again. Nikola Vucevic has fallen off a cliff in terms of just efficiency. He's getting older. DeMar DeRozan, he's getting older. I'm just waiting for this team to just sell to the deadline, and I don't know if they're going to do it. They remind me of the Pistons when Pistons fans were calling for a rebuild and they just wouldn't. I think they're going to get to a point where when they do want to rebuild, they're not going to get anything for the players that they have.
No. Remember there was a point in time where there was Donovan Mitchell. Remember when he was being traded and Pistons fans were like, no, thank you. Me and Adam had discussions too on the morning show, just talking about that. And I remember looking back on it now, like there were better options available that Pistons fans, and it's not like a bad thing. I just think that was the point in time where people had that much faith in what they were building. Like they had that much faith in their young core. Like I'm good on Donovan Mitchell. I think we're building something. He's too expensive. Looking back, you're like, I would trade the farm for a player like that. Like it's funny how things change. And I think going forward, you're right. Like it'll turn from, they want Pistons fans want to rebuild. And now it's going to get to what can we do to get the hell out of this rebuild? Even if you have to make a desperate trade, like trading for Zach LaVine, because there were people out there I saw that wanted Zach LaVine, and I can't fault them too much. But it's getting to that point where desperation is kind of lurking in, and people will take anything that is qualified as an upgrade. They'll take it right now. They'll take it. And you got to watch when you're desperate, because that's how you get tied up into these terrible contracts, which elongate a rebuild, or you just be stuck in this purgatory of mid, which Pistons we just got out of a couple of years ago. I know we seem to get worse, but who saw that coming?
Yeah, I think what you said, you hit the nail on the head when you say you want to get better. And I think the Pistons have been rebuilding for 4 years. They're probably going to have another top 5 pick this year. Well, they are going to have another top 5 pick this year. It's hard to develop all these young guys at once. That's why I know one of these young guys is going to be moved. It's going to happen. The Pistons keep telling us they want to get better. They want to get better. Well, if you want to get better, you're going to have to bring in veteran players. You're going to have to try to trade for guys like a LaVine. This deadline has been so quiet in terms of like star movement. Because I remember last year it was crazy. This to me is probably the most quietest trade deadline I can remember in recent memory. And I don't know if it's because teams are just so afraid of this new CBA and the first and the second apron, and they've made a lot of rule changes of how teams can spend their money. Like the buyout market's completely different now. It's just there's so many I can't even say that word right now. There's so many changes to the new CBA. I think that's why it has been so quiet. But I'm kind of glad that it's gotten quiet with Zach LaVine, because it just doesn't seem like a move that would really get them to even a play-in or an 8 seed, in my opinion.
No, I think another we were talking about earlier with Houston and Orlando. I think another city that's been doing it right is Indiana. Like what they've been doing, the Pacers. Like you look at their rebuild. Like they got a Tyrese Halliburton, which God forbid he's one of the best point guards. You can argue the best pure point guard in the NBA. He's been terrific. But look how they've built a roster around him. They already had Miles Turner there. They get a Buddy Hield. They go out and get Benedict Mathurin. They draft him. And then when they sign a Bruce Brown, a veteran who's won at a high level. He knows his role. He embraces it. And then when the time's right, the difference is they had assets and they were able to give up multiple first-round picks. But Siakam is like the perfect piece for that team. Perfect. And you look at the bench, they've drafted well late in the first and second round. They've got guys that are complementary players that come off the bench and are great players. And I think the Pacers, with what them and Rick Carlisle are doing, I think that's a perfect recipe for a rebuild. Like, look at them now. Now they're fun to watch. Like, just who cares how many games they win? They're fun. Like, I find myself watching Pacers games mostly because of Tyrese Halliburton, but still, I'm like, this team, like, you start to, have a tear come down your eye. You play Marvin's Room a little bit, and you're sitting there watching the Pacers. You're like, man, this is sad. Like, this is how it should be. Like, you go from the dark, you go from the pits, and then you build your way out of it, and they've done it the right way. But the Pistons, it's been rough. Shout out to the Pacers. They're doing a great job. They're doing a great job.
I said last week, like, if I'm a Pistons fan, I got to see Tyrese Halliburton and Donovan Mitchell 4 times a year. And those are two guys that I know a lot of Pistons fans wanted the draft. And you could even use the Cavs as an example too of how they fast tracked their rebuild. Like they had cap space, and the way they used their cap space is when there were big trades moving, like whether that was Kyrie Irving, James Harden, Kevin Durant, they put themselves in there. Like they got Jared Allen for like basically nothing just because they were a third or a fourth team during a trade. Like this organization's like, we have cap flexibility, but they never put themselves as like a third team in a trade. Like the only time they've really done that of recent memory was Marvin Bagley when they got him for a second. It was like a 5-team deal.
Right.
Like, or even like taking on a bad contract for maybe a possible first. They've never done that either. It's just like, I don't really get like what they're trying to accomplish or what they're trying to do. If it's just getting a top 5 draft pick like every year, like me and you both could have done that.
Yeah. And you're freeing up cap space without being a desired destination. Like there's no point. Like no one's going to come here in free agency. You have to acquire someone through trade. But what assets do you have to give up? Like to your point, it should have always been, if you clear up this cap space, you better go get somebody that's willing to come here and take a bigger role. Maybe someone that's a third option on a team that's only getting better. That's why I liked OG at the time. I know he's going to stay probably with the Knicks, but regardless, somebody that can come here, take on a bigger role. There's no one out there. Like there's no one. You would have to have. You'd have to take on a bad contract and get a first round pick or get some assets that then flip for somebody eventually. But now you're too late. Like you're 4 years in, you hit the panic button. You're in desperate mode, and now you're just trying to. Even the thought of Zach LaVine makes some people happy, not everybody, but some people happy. Like you're in a tough spot.
Yeah, I get it with them. I 100% get.
Yeah, I do too.
Wanting to try to get a Zach LaVine. It makes sense. Like you get a guy that can create his own shot, get you 20, take some pressure off Cade and Ivey and the other young guys. I get it, but at the end of the day, these rookies are going to need contract extensions. Like Cade is extension eligible this summer. Like I keep telling people, he's probably going to get what Tyrese Halliburton got. Just expect it. They don't want to lose Cade. They're going to give him that max rookie extension. It's going to be over $200 million. I'm just warning fans now. I've been trying to warn them for 3-4 months. It's going to happen. But I did want to, shift to another young guy, and that's Jaden Ivey. And we played the Cavs this week, like we were talking about Donovan Mitchell, and we also played the Clippers. And Jaden Ivey's been getting a lot of praise from these all-stars, these guys that have, won basketball games. A lot of people consider them, the best at their position. So my question to you is, do you think that this is a good confidence booster for Jaden Ivey? Because we all know he was in the doghouse early this year with Monty Williams. Yeah. Is it good to see guys like a Donovan Mitchell talk to him at the end of the game? A guy like Russell Westbrook, who's won MVP and has been that starting guard, and now he's coming off the bench for the Clippers. Like, do you think that it's good for him at the end of the day to try to get better?
I think the best praise for any young player like an Ivey isn't from your coach. It isn't from your friend, your family, your friends. It's from colleagues. It's from guys that have done it and done it at a high level. And I think Russell Westbrook and Donovan Mitchell, the two biggest stamps you could get because of the type of player he is. Like player comp wise, his athleticism comparable to Russell Westbrook. That was the thing coming out. I know people compared it. I don't think he's completely Russell, but still with his athleticism, I love it. I think this is what Ivey needs. He's playing really well. I mentioned earlier over the last 10 games, he's giving you 24 and 4. He's shooting better from 3. I know the turnovers, he had 4 turnovers today, but regardless, that's something that, of course, the young player, especially young guards, like that move at 150% speed like he does, like that's going to be a problem. But I love Ivey. I think he's a future all-star with what he can bring, like his God-given talent on top of the other things he does. I mean, when they really let him orchestrate the offense, it looks great. It does, because he's such a threat with his athleticism, his ability to drive to the basket. Now he's a respectable 3-point shooter. I know his mid-range is it's not where it should be, and I don't think it is close to where it will be. But I think this is everything. It's a stamp on for Ivey, and I think this is a confidence booster for him moving forward, because I still believe, and call me crazy, I think Ivey and Cade can work. I think they can work. The biggest thing for Ivey, though, it has to be playing, or it has to be his 3-point shot, his 3-point percentage. Can he get it, 35, 36%. I know he's shooting about 33, 34, which is fine. But I love the thought of those two sharing a backcourt. I think Ivey's going to be a fantastic player. So the fact that Donovan Mitchell and Russell Westbrook see it too, it's a great thing.
Yeah, I think they see the potential. Like they see the all-star potential in him.
Mm-hmm.
And I know a lot of people are comparing him to Ja. I think it was just because of the haircut. I really do. Like when I watched Ivey, like I saw flashes of a little bit of Victor Oladipo before he had his injuries in Indiana. Like that's a player that I thought he could be comparable. And like you look at those Indiana Pacer teams with Victor Oladipo, he was averaging 30 points a game, and he was like the guy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you're starting to see that though. You're starting to see the confidence. You're starting to see him attack the basket. Like his first step, he did it a bunch tonight. He's just such a fast, twitchy guard that he's just a blur to try to stay in front of. Transition, he's a nightmare. The 3-point shot, I know a lot of people, that was a knock on him coming out of college. He was not a good 3-point shooter, and he's worked on it. I think the Bally broadcast today said he's shooting over 40% from three, which that's pretty damn good over that stretch. Like that's really good for a guy that was quote unquote a weak 3-point shooter. I know people get into debates. I know they're debating in the chat right now. Cade and Ivey don't work together. Like they just don't gel well together. And I just don't think we've seen enough of it. And it's kind of been availability on Cade's end, and that's not his fault. Injuries happen. But I think you saw tonight, like Jaden Ivey was bringing the ball up the court and Cade was playing off ball. And Cade had a pretty decent game tonight. I mean, I've never seen him miss 2 free throws. Like that was the first for me. Like he missed like both of them. And I think his knee is still bothering personally. I saw him with the ice pack on his knee tonight. So I hope everything's good there with Cade. But it is good to see, all-star players like that, give him praise and, give him his flowers, because they don't want to see him just, go down that road where he just has no confidence in himself. Like Russ said that, he was like, I kind of took him under my wing this past summer. Like we're working out together. Donovan Mitchell is just like, yeah, it's like some people told me about him and, how good he is. And we have the same agent. So, we connected that way. So, I just wanted to talk about it for a little bit. I know there's basically nothing to talk about this time of year.
It's kind of and to the point about his colleague giving him praise. It reminds me when Cade got praise from Kevin Durant or just the Pistons in general. But players 2 years ago, when Cade was playing really well and he should have won Rookie of the Year, I still believe that. But he was balling the second half of the season. Everybody was praising Cade, and that is true. Like the confidence, that's everything. If you lose your confidence, you have nothing. Like it's hard enough. These guys have to go out there and be confident every night, especially with Ivey, where, he can have sometimes he can be inconsistent. Like as long as he's confident, the shots are going to fall eventually. Like you mentioned, over the last 10 games, he's shooting 40% from three. And it's funny because he had a quote earlier this year, and I loved it because the big thing coming out of the draft was like, oh, he needs the ball constantly in his hands, which I do believe. Listen, Cade and Ivey, if you're a great guard, you need the ball in your hands. It's not like a scientific thing. Now, Ivey said he plays comfortable. He can play off ball when needed, but it seemed like he was never getting the ball, which was a problem. So it's finding a balance between those two, and it's hard because last year it was Ivey's team completely. No Cade. He's out there running the show. The year prior, it was Cade's team. He's out there running the show. And then this season, those two are just thrown together with all they have is both a season under their belt of being the guy. It's going to take some time. And of course, being with Cade getting hurt with that knee injury and being out some time, it sucks. So I agree with you. I think availabilities hurt them or their ability to be able to gel, because I do think they complement each other. I do. And maybe I'm wrong on that, but I like the idea of those two in your backcourt, or even how like Cade eventually playing some small forward, which I think he can still do. But those two, I certainly think can play together, because you see Ivey's shot improving. Like he's done a great job with that.
Said that last week and I got so much hate for it. I know some people in the comments, like, they agreed with me. Like I had said, play Cade in that Jason Tatum role, like at the small forward, because I think Cade is more than capable of playing point guard. I think he's more than capable of playing shooting guard. If you want to play him shooting guard, you can. He did it tonight. But I'm more intrigued of having a fast point guard like Ivey running the show. And the turnovers, I will admit, they are frustrating, like the no-look passes that he had tonight. I think he watches more film and he slows down, he doesn't have to, do stuff like that 100% of the time. Like I said, it looks great when he doesn't turn the ball over, but I think I'm more intrigued to see Ivey run the show versus Cade, because I think the play style is a little bit more simplistic. Where with Cade, it's slowed down, it's more methodical. Cade likes that mid-range game where Ivey just likes attacking the basket and kicking it out. And I think that benefits the personnel that we have now, like, the vets like, Alec Burks, Bojan, we even saw, Asar hit a 3 tonight. I think it just benefits more of having Ivey play the point guard, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think Ivey, like I mentioned earlier, his athleticism opens up the floor for others. It just does. Like, he's such a threat. He's going to blow by the first defender. Someone's going to have to come over to help, and that opens up shots. Now, with Cade's play style, I think the Tatum thing, it's funny because Chris Platty said he was Tatum-esque, and he got roasted for it. But I think there's some truth to that. Like, maybe not direct play style, but to your point, like how they like to play, how they both like to score. I know Tatum's a better three-point shooter. I get all of that. But him playing that Tatum role, I don't mind it. I think Ivey, he's an underrated point guard. Like, he's an underrated playmaker. And I do think Ivey as a defender, although he hasn't been great, he has the tools to be a much better defender. Better. The athleticism, the size, the wingspan, he does. So they're both unfinished products. But I think eventually, hopefully, they get to a point where, like you said, you could have more Ivey running the show there, and Cade just strictly being in some instances playing off ball and just scoring the basketball, because he can do that at a high level. Like, he certainly can. And it would cut his turnovers down.
Yeah, for sure. Just kind of to simplify it, because I think sometimes when I'm watching, it's a lot of ISOs. There's no ball movement.
Right.
It's just from like the start of the season to now. Like, there's a possession tonight where it did, turn into a Sasser 3, but like Alec Burks like held onto the ball for 15 seconds, and then Sasser had the ball in the corner, and obviously he made the 3, but like the lack of ball movement or the screen setting right now, it's just like they're not running like any type of NBA offense. Sometimes in certain possessions, it's just ISO, and it's just like you're so predictable for teams playing defense. Like, he's just gonna ISO for 15 seconds, so let's just play some zone or something. Like, it's just, when I watch it, it's just like, wow, man, like, we need some help bad.
Yeah, I see that. Weezy G 3-on-3, even Sasser is a better point guard than Cade. 4 years experience starting at Houston. Like, yeah, there's something about the experience too. Like, for Cade, he's had a rookie season, he's missed an entire season, and now he's playing coming off of not a severe injury, but a season-ending injury. So for Cade, I think, yeah, his playmaking's great, but the more you can alleviate pressure off of him, and you have a dynamic guard who can play make as well, like, yeah, I mean, it doesn't hurt to have both those guys. But put the ball more in Ivey's hands. Like, just do it.
Yeah, like Organic Lendo. Like, I know he's like me. He's a big Jaden Ivey supporter. He said Ivey has been 10 to 12 games to play with the ball in his hands more, getting pulled at every mistake. Cade has played 35 plus games to iron out his horrendous turnovers. He just needs reps. Yeah, like I said, it's the message is just not consistent. I don't know if it's just because Monty Williams knows that Jaden Ivey can be like a star player and he's harder on him, or it's just maybe they just don't see eye to eye. I don't know. We're not in the locker room. We could speculate what's going on, but I mean, it doesn't look well. But speaking of Monty Williams and speaking of his favorite player, Killian Hayes, so James Edwards this week had reported that Detroit was close to trading Killian Hayes before Williams' arrival, but Monty wanted to work with Killian. He thought that there was something there, from afar. Monty admired Killian's game. So my question to you is, do you think it was a mistake not letting Troy Weaver try to get something for Killian Hayes this summer?
To be honest with you, I do understand Monty's side, although we disagree with it because hindsight, obviously. He played well down the stretch of last season. So starting at guard and playing significant minutes during that stretch, of course. That was, but the unfortunate part is that is probably the highest value you'll have of Cade, or excuse me, of Killian. That is the highest value. Him playing the way he played then last season, that was the highest value you would have gotten for Killian Hayes. Now that that's the gamble that Monty took. And that's why, at the end of the day, Monty's a head coach. He does not work in the front office. And it's Troy Weaver's job to understand that. Like, he'll be like, hey, listen, Monty, I get you want to work with him. But if we're going to trade this guy, and we took a Marcus Sasser, and we think he'll be a tremendous player, we have to trade Killian. Like, this is the highest value he'll have. And, you take into consideration Monty Williams, and I think it's backfired. And now it's came back to bite them in the ass. Like, Killian Hayes' value is all-time low. He's getting DMPs. He doesn't play. So a San Antonio Spurs is going to come along and be like, hey, let's take him off your hands for scraps. When I think regardless, it wouldn't have been great, but you would have a better offer last offseason given how he played to end the year. So, yes, I do think it was a mistake. It was a big mistake to listen to Monty in that instance. I get why he'd say that. Maybe there's unlocked potential. No. Looking back on it, yes, it was a big mistake.
Yeah, I had conversations with, Corey Woods, former coworker of ours. And
great guy. Love Corey.
Yeah, love Corey. Shout out to Corey. The guy works his ass off. I was like, if Monty can turn Cameron Payne into a quality player, I was intrigued to see what he could do with Killian. And, at the time, we didn't know that Monte Morris was going to be out for, half the season. Like, he was healthy. Like you mentioned, you trade up to get Marcus Sasser, who is a combo guard, if you want to categorize him that. He can play a little bit of point guard and shooting guard. And you kind of look at the roster, you're like, yeah, there's a lot of point guards on this roster. But I understand it from Monty's standpoint, like you. Maybe there's something there. Maybe there's some untapped potential that, Jarek Jack and myself can work with him. Obviously, we've watched Killian for the past 4 years. What I'll say about Killian Hayes is great defender, good passer. Mm-hmm. The offensive game just hasn't come around yet. And I don't know if it ever will. He might just be a backup point guard, and that is completely fine. Like, if he could just be like a Marcus Smart type of player on another team as a backup, I think that's okay. And some players are that. But it's funny because we get news today that his team wants to be dealt. He wants to be traded because he's not getting playing time. He's not getting DMPs. And there was a sports book earlier this week. I want to put this on the screen. And they have his top 10 odds. You mentioned the Spurs. Like, they're obviously a favorite. I know people are going to go down to the Shanghai Sharks and laugh. Like, how is that not number one? Because I know some people are going to say that. But, I mean, like, the 5 NBA teams that are favorites, they need point guard help right now. And the European teams, 2 of those teams he's already played for. He's already played for Gillette, and he's already played for the number 6 team. That's where he played before he got drafted.
Not Gillette.
Yeah, like Gillette. he played Gillette. Yeah, like he had played, for Gillette when he was a teenager. But like the fact that a Vegas sports book, Shanghai Sharks is number 10, man. Like, I don't know. I know some people are gonna laugh at that. I know they are, but I don't know. I just kind of look at the whole, because I wanted to put context to it. Because Monty said, they're like, oh, it's Monty's fault why he's still here. Like, well, at the time, like, we didn't know Monte Morris was going to be out for the year. Like, if Monte Morris was 100% healthy, maybe they do trade him. Maybe they're like, hey, we got Monte. Like, we don't really need Killian. Monte's a proven veteran backup point guard, but he gets hurt. And I think that's a big reason why Killian did get to stay, in my opinion, anyways.
Yeah, I think at this point, what Killian is like, and he is a backup point guard. And even for the Marcus Smart comparison, like what Marcus brings on the floor leadership wise, on top of his 3-point shot, which has actually improved during his late years in Boston, like he became a respectable catch and shoot 3-point shooter. Like he brought value in his defense. Like the guy won a defensive player of the year. So like even the Killian Hayes thing, like he'll never win a defensive player of the year. So, because before I fell victim to that early on, I'm like, I looked at the Marcus Smart arc, and I'm thinking, man, like, I didn't think he'd win a Defensive Player of the Year, but I'm thinking maybe he can be a respectable role player. He can provide and be tough on defense, and it just isn't the case. Like, he's such an offensive liability that you just can't play him. Like, and he doesn't have the versatility like an Asar Thompson or the athleticism that an Asar Thompson has, like where you can kind of get away with it. And Asar is much more versatile, but the Killian Hayes thing is the Spurs make the most sense because of their obviously with Tony Parker and their history with developing foreign players. And you go play with Victor, but I don't know. Like, I don't even know if any situation could make, like, you'd think on this roster with the opportunity he would have a better opportunity to grow, but maybe what he needs is to be on a team, be a ninth, eighth man, and just be kind of insulated by NBA veterans. And like, you don't really notice Killian because there's other players, there's other things happening. He's probably playing 10, 15 minutes a night. Like the Pistons, I think it's over. Like I know his team came out and said they want him traded. Well, guess what, buddy? Like, yeah, we want you traded too. I think it's just a bad fit. And I think we've seen enough of Killian Hayes. We have at this point. It's almost like it's like the baby was born at the hospital and you tried to take him back to the hospital and be like, can you take him back? Like, that's what his former team, when he played as a teenager, being on that list means. Like, no, you got Killian. He'll be in the NBA, but he'll be at best a seventh man and eighth man, I would say, not even a seventh man. Like, I think what he is now, what he'll always be to me.
Yeah, I think a lot of people in the comment section right now, like Do It Effortless, said, Killian has had 4 years to get better, and he hasn't gotten any better offensively. No. And I think that's 100% true. When he was here as a rookie, he had to play with DeLon Wright, which I get why Casey did that. You want to put a vet out there just in case, he freaks out because he's a rookie, but he's had every opportunity to take the keys and say, this is my team. And he just hasn't done it. It's weird because you look at him and he's a pretty big guard. Like, he's a 6'5" guard, and like sometimes he plays like he's 5'6". Like, he just does not play his size. Like, I thought when the Pistons drafted him, I said, wow, you're getting a 6'5", 200-pound guard that's just going to be able to bully opposing point guards, getting to the basket. But like, he hasn't really done that. He's got like these like weird floaters. He still can't finish with his right hand. He's so left hand dominant that like it's almost like he won't finish with his right. He just won't do it. It's always left-handed. So I think a change of scenery, to your point, would be good. I just don't know how much playing time he'll actually get. Obviously, when you get traded, they're going to want to see like what he can do. But I think at the end of the day, he's probably going to be on the bench or at best in the G League. That's just what I think his career may be. And I'm probably going to get hate for it after this live stream's over because people think I hate Killian Hayes. I just don't hate him. I'm just realistic. I just think as a backup point guard, I think that's going to be his role in the NBA. And I just don't think he's going to be a starter on any team.
Yeah, and the confirmation that that's true would be he had more room for error here in Detroit and still couldn't develop. So when you go to another team, the rope you have to make mistakes or the room for error will be significantly less. So why would you think he would thrive there? I think for Killian, his opportunity was in Detroit, even his first year. That was I believe that was one of the last years with Blake. He got to play with veterans, and it just didn't work out. Like, I don't think Killian mentally he doesn't have the mentality to be a foundational franchise player. He never had. He never had it. Even coming out, he has all the physical tools, right? Like 6'5", like you said, 200 pounds, good handles. Left-handed, but again, he can't finish much with his right hand. He, like you said, he plays smaller than he is. Like he doesn't. It's not like he's posting guys up, being 6'5", 200 pounds against smaller guards. He's shown flashes defensively, but especially in today's NBA, if you can't score at an NBA level, there's no room for you. There's guys all over. Like, look at Marcus Sasser. I mean, he comes in right away and he's a bucket. Like, there's guy, and he's a good defender too. Like, there's more where that came from, unfortunately, for Killian. So even if he goes to his next destination, like at best, he'll be the back end of the bench. But hell, I mean, after a while, he might just be waived and he might just be a free agent. I mean, who knows? And he might be in a G League situation or playing overseas, to be honest with you. I don't know about Shanghai. I mean, that may be a little disrespectful, but who knows? He might join Jimmer Fredette. I mean, who knows? Hell.
Yeah, I saw the Shanghai stuff, and I knew people on Twitter were just going to run with that. I was like,
good luck learning Chinese. You see
people already think I hate him. I don't hate him.
No, it's just being realistic. You're just being realistic with him. You know, he is. I think he is what he is. I think what Killian is now or last year is what he'll always be. I don't see Killian taking like steps forward. I think he, you know, like he's hit his peak, and whatever that peak is, he's at it.
Well, I mean, you look at guys like RJ Hampton. He was in the same draft class as Killian. He's playing in the G League for the Miami Heat right now, and RJ Hampton has a more offensive game than Killian Hayes, and he can't even crack the rotation for the Miami Heat. Obviously, they're a playoff team, but that's just kind of like the context you have to look at it. Like RJ Hampton actually played for the Pistons, and he was getting playing time with Killian Hayes. Like, I think that's just his future. Like, it might be end of the bench, maybe a third option point guard, or if it's on a bad team like the Spurs, maybe a backup point guard. But like at the end of the day, I think you have to rip the Band-Aid off. You have to admit that Troy Weaver's first pick with Killian Hayes was probably his worst pick since he's been here. I think we all fell victim to it. I remember Kevin O'Connor having him rated over guys like LaMelo Ball as the best guard. I think we all fall victim to it. I thought Henry Ellenson was going to be the next Kevin Love. I really did. I was
that preseason he looked good though. The summer league, excuse me, the summer league, he looked good though.
Yeah, summer league, Henry Ellenson, man,
he was different.
I was dead wrong, man. Like, don't listen to me for draft advice. I'm a dumbass.
Dude, especially in today's NBA, the league is so deep and offense is so easy to come by. I shouldn't say easy, but it's much easier in 2023, 2024 that if you can't score at respectable NBA percentages, like where the league's going, there's no room for you. Like your point about RJ Hampton speaks to that. Like this league is only going to get deeper, man. Like there's just how the rules are. Like you see guys dropping 50, 60, look at 70. I mean, it's just if you can't score 10 a game and be decent efficient, have decent efficiencies, then you're out. Your percentages aren't matching up to what they are. I mean, he's never shot over 35% from three, 34%. Like it's tough to come by. Good luck finding a roster spot, man.
Yeah, like I said, I wish him well. I hope he does have success. I just know some people think I hate him. Like someone retweeted me on Twitter today. So this is a Killian Hayes hate account. I'm like, no, it's not.
No, I fell victim to it. I've defended Killian. I think he's obviously a great guy, great family. I talked to his dad before, great family. But at the end of the day, like this league it keeps moving. So for Killian, like unfortunately, hopefully he turns it around his next destination. Maybe he needs a change of scenery. My prediction, I don't think it matters, to be honest with you. That's where I'm at. But we'll see.
For sure. We'll see. Just want to do some injury news, obviously. Just be really quick. Isaiah Stewart's going to be out for the next 10 to 14 days with a sprained ankle, you guys. I don't know. It seems like he had that toe injury, and he just never really seemed like he was 100% healthy. He was gimping out there. I was excited because they actually played him off the bench. I think it was last week, and I was like, okay, this is what a lot of Pistons fans have been talking about. Like Isaiah Stewart is that energy hustle guy. Let's bring him off the bench, and obviously he's going to be out for 10 to 14 days. But do you have any thoughts on him being out these next couple of weeks? Any players that you're looking forward to getting more minutes?
Hopefully Asar Thompson, going back to that point. But for me with Isaiah Stewart, it's funny because he signed that extension and I know people were panicking. Some people, I don't want to say everybody, but there's people like, how did Isaiah Stewart get that contract? Like my good friend, Michael Gentry, I do the show with. He's the ultimate quietest Pistons hater. I'll say it. He thinks his Red Wings are so great, which they are. They are great, by the way. I can't even tell they are doing really well. But we've always had a little banter back and forth. And his point was like, man, Isaiah Stewart he's a bench player on a championship team, which I'm like, hey, you're not wrong. But the fact that other great teams want beef stew, it means he provides something. Like this team's definitely going to miss him. And you look at his contract over the next couple of years, I think it'll age pretty well, to be honest with you, depending on how the cap goes up. I don't think it's a bad deal. But I think Isaiah Stewart this year, for the most part, has been fine. He's not moving the needle, but hopefully his absence opens up that 4 spot to where you can maybe place him Asar at the 4. I just don't. I mean, it sucks because at the end of the day, you're playing Kevin Knox at the 4. So maybe I'm not getting what I asked for, but hopefully it opens up some playing time for those guys. Specifically for Asar Thompson.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen, and I will give Monty credit here. They've been using Asar more as a roll man lately, playing him in the pick and roll, which I think you can do because he's just such a explosive athlete. Like, I swear, man, he jumped like a good 5-6 feet in the air, just swatting Paulo Banchero's shot today.
Ridiculous.
And the Magic announcers are old as hell, so they probably couldn't see it. Like, oh yeah, Duran blocked it. I was like, no, that was Asar. Like back-to-back blocks. He's just so athletic. But I wish Beefs do well. Hope he gets better. But maybe we'll see him off the bench more because I think that to me, ultimately, it's going to be his role. Like, just be like that Kevon Looney for the Pistons. Be that energy and glue guy that keeps this team together.
Yeah, we talked about the leader. I mean, he doesn't have the veteran experience, but you talk about a voice. Like Isaiah Stewart is a voice in the locker room. He does bring that tenacity. I mean, he isn't afraid of no man. We saw that with LeBron James. We've seen that we saw it with Gilbert Arenas when Gilbert and him came close by each other. So Isaiah Stewart, I think, is a great. He's a fan favorite because of his mentality. He gives you a little glimpse of the bad boy Pistons and just the 2014 that won a championship that I got to see. Like, he does give you that old school basketball feel. But if we're talking just simply skill set, like when you're eventually at the point where you're trying to win playoff games and trying to win playoff series, he probably is your 6th, 7th man. Like, yeah, he is a bench player. But again, the Celtics being interested in him, good teams want him. It should tell you something.
Yeah, for sure. Like, I think he has value. I just think people saw the contract and they're like, man, like we gotta play this guy off the bench because I think at the end of the day, he is a good 3-point shooter, but he's not a movement 3-point shooter. He's a standstill 3-point shooter. So if you run him off that 3-point line, like he's going to pass it or turn the ball over. Right. I still think he does have value on this team, though. It's just kind of like a glue guy off the bench. Like, if the Pistons need some energy, just sub Isaiah Stewart in maybe, and you can play him at center or power forward, depending on matchups. But wanted to talk about this guy. Mentioned him at the top of the podcast, and that's Monte Morris. So recently, playoff teams like the Phoenix Suns and the Minnesota Timberwolves have trade interest in Monte Morris. So my question to you would be, do you think it would be a mistake to trade off Monte Morris to a playoff team right now because the Pistons really don't have that veteran backup point guard?
Yes, I do. I would prefer they keep him. And I know you're at a point now where you think, well, you have to sell for assets. I think you keep him. I think his value, number one, he's a good backup point guard. He's a good backup point guard. Guess what? When I mentioned earlier at the beginning of the show, how this team turns the ball over at one of the worst rates in the NBA, guess who's one of the best at taking care of the basketball? Monte Morris. So he provides that as well to this team. And you have so many young guards. Like, I think his value is important. So yes, and he's from Flint, which there's a little bonus point on there. So I like Monte. I think you have to keep him. I've been a big fan of him. The vets I love, him and Alec Burks. Those are my two. I love Alec Burks too, man. I don't want to see him go at all. Just what those two guys provide. Mm-hmm. I know they have value, and there's going to be playoff teams that would love a Monte Morris, but I just think what he brings to this squad, I know you have to figure it out. But even if you trade him next season or you trade him in the future when Marcus Sasser's ready or you figuring out an opportunity, I just think his value is he does provide so much just being out there on the court with these guys. Like we mentioned it, how they need a veteran guard. That's Monte Morris. Like he fits that perfectly. So just let the contract expire. If you want to bring him back, cool. But let the contract expire, let him play out, and then just start Marcus Sasser next season or have him as a backup point guard.
Yeah, like for him, he's a UFA. That's why the Pistons traded for him. Obviously, they love those expiring contracts. But I was really excited when they did trade for him because I looked at his assist to turnover ratio, and they're like, you look like across the NBA in history, like the guy doesn't turn the ball over much. He can hit an outside shot. He makes sound basketball decisions. It never seems like he's in a rush. But I understand veteran teams that have playoff aspirations like the Phoenix Suns. Phoenix does not have a point guard at all. It's Bradley Beal and Devin Booker playing point guard. Not to say that they're not capable of playing it, but they used all of their assets basically to assemble the team that they have. So I understand it from that standpoint. I don't really think Phoenix has too much they could possibly offer Detroit. I just don't. Minnesota to me is interesting because they do have some players that I do like. But at the end of the day, I'm with you. I would rather keep him and re-sign him because he's only 28 years old. He's a player that, to be out of all the veterans, he's the only vet I see hyping up. He doesn't sit down when he's on the bench. Like, he's clapping. He's, his energy is infectious. And I think he's one of those vets. It's just a good locker room guy at the end of the day. And I think he likes playing for his hometown team, which, I think a lot of guys, when you talk to them, like, you look at Aiden Hutchinson for the Detroit Lions, like, I'm sure he's really thankful that he's playing in Detroit and not Jacksonville. Like,
absolutely.
100%. Like, I think guys like that, I'd like to bring back. And then you have a backup point guard that Cade Cunningham and Jaden Ivey can learn from in practice. Mm-hmm. So for me, I would probably not trade him. I know some people in the comments section are probably like, yo, you should just offload him. He's a free agent. Like, who cares?
Yeah, I don't think he would command, like, I mean, what money you extending Monte Morris for? Like, that's fine. I'm cool with keeping him around. And just because of the player he is on the court, but like you said, off the court, what he provides, the leadership, the relationship he has with the players, like he's a competitor. He wants to get out there. He's been working his ass off to get back. So I just don't think the return on Monte Morris is worth trading him from what he brings. That's just my opinion. Even if you do have a Marcus Sasser, I think there's a way you can play those guys, especially if they do end up trading an Alec Burks. We'll see. But I don't mind a Monte Morris coming off your bench, extending him. I think that'd be a fair. That's a vet you'd like to keep around. Like, he's played for winning basketball teams, and he doesn't turn the ball over, and he can shoot threes. Like, welcome to the Pistons. You can stay around.
Because I was excited when we traded for him. I was like, wow,
me too.
We got Monte for nothing because the Wizards just wanted the salary dump. I was like, okay, like, I kind of see it. And, people made the joke that the reason why Troy traded for him is because he looks just like him, which I kind of laughed at that. But I was like, man, you guys are wild. I know someone had asked, like, what would a trade for Monte even be? Comes from Ryan Boseman. I don't. Or what could a new deal look for? Oh, I completely read that question wrong. My bad, Ryan. What could a new deal for him look like? I would probably say, like, he's on a $10 million contract. He probably wants a little bit of a raise. So maybe you do, like,
what,
I don't
three
know,
for
36, 38, like something like that. I think that could probably be a number that you look at in terms of re-signing him. And I think the organization would probably want to bring him back.
Yeah, because what were you were paying Bagley? What was that, 3 for 33?
33 or 36. I don't remember the number.
Yeah, I'll take Monte Morris for that money, 100%. So if it's 3 for 36, yeah, I'm cool with it. Like, especially for a backup point guard giving you 10, 5 and 5, shooting well from three, barely turning the ball over. Like, yeah, I think that's worth it.
100%. We do have one more topic on this podcast. And I know we've talked about both of these bets, and I asked this to Chris this week, and I'm going to ask you the same question. What would you like so would you like to move on from Bojan Bogdanovic and Alec Burks? If, like, let's say you're the GM right now, would you look to move on from them with the deadline?
So I think Troy made this mistake. I think Bogey should have been traded last deadline. I think you messed up there bad, because you probably could have gotten a first-round pick for Bogey, given last year he was playing well. Teams felt like there was teams, and I don't know that this is every year, but last year it felt like, especially the Lakers, like there was teams that were like, man, we're a Bogey away from winning the championship. You could have got someone to pay a high amount, maybe a first-rounder and a player, whatever it was, for Bogey. And I said this on From Half Court too. Like, it goes back to the Killian point. That was the highest value for Bogey because now he's a year older. There's a disadvantage to keeping him around, and I think you're seeing that. Like, he's great offensively. He's a veteran. He's played a lot of basketball, but he's a player you have to trade. Like, now time's running out. Like, I would trade him this deadline. Figure it out. You're not going to get what you could have got last offseason, but if you can get some assets for him, I'll take it. Now for Alec Burks, I like Alec Burks. Maybe I'm a little biased with him too because I just love what he provides. Like his 3-point shooting, a guy that comes off your bench. Like I think he's a perfect fit for any team, and I selfishly don't want to give him up. And he's not old either. He's only like 31 years old. He's still got plenty of ball left in him. So I would lean towards trying to trade Bogey this deadline, getting something for him and keeping Burks. But I could see a situation where both go potentially, but preferably just Bojan because they're about a year late on that. But I would prefer just Bojan.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to trade Bojan. When I talked to James Edwards off camera, he said like they want to keep Bojan and add another vet to the mix, which like if that's the plan, okay, I get it. But I don't think he can be your second leading scorer. Like if Cade Cunningham's your first leading scorer, cool. 34-year-old Bojan should not be your second leading scorer. I think Bojan could have a bench role on a good championship level team because I know a lot of championship level teams are probably talking to the Pistons right now, asking what it's going to take. And I think the asking price, to me, I think you should try to get maximum value for the players that you have. Like if you want a first round pick and a good player, like who am I to say no to that? Like if someone offers me that, I'll probably take it too. For Burks, to your point, he's a good vet, but at times he's
erratic.
Someone has a nickname on this podcast for him. They call him Black Hole Burks. Just because he just gets in these games sometimes and he thinks he's Kobe. Like he just like does not pass the ball and he just shoots like these crazy mid-range contested jump shots. I don't know. Like he's gonna be a UFA. He's making 10 million. He's probably gonna look to get at least 15. And like that's the question you have to ask yourself is, do I want to spend $15 million of my cap space to re-sign Alec Burks? No. Me personally, I wouldn't. I would probably try to sell him off. If you can get some seconds, if you can get maybe a good young player, that's the route I would go personally. But I think for Bojan, they're going to keep him. Burks, I'm like 50-50. He may get traded. He may not. But like I said, this deadline has me scared shitless because I don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, I don't want to pay Burks $50 million. So if that's the rate, then no, I'm okay. I think for Bogey, ideally, you'd have to look at it from choice perspective. They feel like if he's coming off the bench and if he's scoring coming off the bench, then he's valuable. Okay, like I'm cool with Bogey. Again, both these guys to me, at least Bogey's played more ball, so he gets the situational aspect, like you said about Burks. Like watching him take the last shot of the game a couple weeks ago pissed me off so much. So I get that. I get he could be erratic. I do. And they're both good. They're both great 3-point shooters. Bogey's a little older. But if you're gonna keep one of these guys, I don't have a problem with keeping Bogey. But again, he's gonna have to come off your bench. And I think we all kind of see that. There's no way he should be starting, especially when your team's winning games. Like he's a off the bench, 13, 14 points, good efficiency. He's not a great. He can't stop a parked car. So defensively, he's bad, but I think his offense is certainly value there.
Yeah, like I said, it's like a vet like him. Like I understand it. Like you got him for basically nothing because you were helping the Knicks out get Jalen Brunson. But
right,
I wouldn't be sad if he was traded. Like if I saw like the Woj text saying like, "Oh, Pistons traded Alec Burks," I'd be like, it's 31, shot chucker. Like I get it, but yeah, man, like it's really interesting to see just how this team has fielded calls because like I just learned that Houston offered us like a bunch of seconds for Burks during the season. We said no, like 3 second-round picks, and we're like, nah, we're good.
That actually happened?
Yeah, it did.
Okay, well now hold on. All right, let's go back to what I said earlier about Burks. Yeah, if you're giving me multiple seconds, yeah, I'm okay. You can trade Burks. I didn't know that was that is. Wow.
Yeah,
he's not worth keeping over a multiple second round picks. I'll say that.
No,
especially as an unrestricted free. What? I wish you would have told me that. Now I'm pissed off.
I just learned it like a week ago that Houston they were looking to upgrade their bench, and they have offered the Pistons 3 second-round picks because Houston has a shitload of draft picks. Like I said, they were looking like they're trying to get Mikal Bridges, but that's not going to happen. Brooklyn wants like 5 first. I don't know who they think Mikal Bridges is, but that's hilarious. Do you have time for maybe like 1 or 2 Q&A questions?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, for sure. This comes from Divine, who he watches every week. And one of the questions he had was, do we think Monty Williams actually looks at the roster next season in terms of making the team overall better, and roster changes will happen?
So if I'm reading this correctly, does anyone think Monty will actually look at the roster next season in terms of making the team overall better? Roster changes will happen. Is he asking if Monty weighs in, like he'll have input on how this roster will look next season? Is that what he's asking?
That's the way I interpreted it. Or you could go a different route. Like, does Monty think, let's see, does anyone think Monty will actually look at the roster next season in terms of making the team overall better and roster changes? Maybe like, will Monty have more of an input in terms of like the guys that he wants to coach? And maybe there's a certain type of archetype of player that, like, let's say there's just like a movement 3-point shooter that's available in free agency. Maybe that's what Devon is asking.
Yeah, I would say yes. I think you certainly have to get Monty's input. I mean, he's the highest paid coach, and on top of that, he is a good coach. Like he gets it. But there's a certain extent where Troy Weaver has to be like, well, this is my opinion. Like, you can't, like we just talked about the Killian Hayes thing.
Yeah.
Like Monty knows ball, but there's going to be a time where he's wrong, just like every other human being. So hopefully it's a more balance. I mean, hopefully it's just Troy Weaver and Monty. I echo that. Hopefully it's just those 2 guys making those decisions and nobody else in the front office. But hey, who am I? So yes, I think we'll have an input, but at the end of the day, it's Troy Weaver is going to be the one fired if things go wrong. So he has to take control of that.
Yeah. I know a lot of people assume that Troy's going to be fired, which I think he would have been fired like when Tom had that press conference with the media members, because I don't think if they were going to move on from him, they would have let him trade Marvin Bagley. Like, if a GM's going to get fired, you're not going to allow him to make trades at all. You just, have a clean slate and let the new GM come in and trade whoever he needs to trade. But there is a couple, like maybe 1 or 2 more questions. Ooh, this is a good one. It's from Eastside Johnny. He said, with $60 million in cap space, a top 5 pick, what moves do you make for people to even care what the Pistons are doing? So maybe give me a name that you're looking at, whether it's free agency or maybe a player that you think the Pistons could possibly trade for.
That's tough.
Okay.
That's tough. Now, I'll tell you this: if I'm Troy Weaver and I have a top 5 pick and I have $60 million in cap space, I'm taking that top 5 pick. I'm taking, because I see people on Twitter too discussing like who's untouchable. I think you probably have 1 to 2 untouchable players. Everyone else is tradable. I'm taking that top 5 pick. I'm combining it with one of these young players. You could pick one, and I'm going out and I'm on the move. I'm trying to get somebody, whether that's a bad team that's trying to go into a rebuild that wants a top 5 pick that has a star on their team, something. I would trade that top 5 pick in a heartbeat, and then you use the rest of the money to go acquire some vets, like we talked about, and then maybe taking out a bad contract for more assets. Like, that's what you do. You have to make this team watchable. You have to not only make moves, but you have to make smart, calculated moves to where you're not stuck in purgatory. So I don't know who that is. I mean, I see people in the chat talking about Brandon Ingram. Maybe it's our Brandon Ingram. I don't know who it is. But you got to get somebody. And you're going to have to probably get rid of one of these young one of your core players for it, but that's the price of doing business.
Yeah, I think they're going to keep the top 5 pick. And I think the reason why they're going to keep it is for the fact of the matter is I don't really like when I was talking to James Edwards, he's like, could you package, like, let's say the Pistons get 4, would you package 4 and maybe Bojan or someone else for Jeremy Grant? I was like, probably not. Like, I'm not like really excited. Like
No,
if
that
we're
doesn't.
talking like maybe if it was like a Lauri Markkanen, I'd be like more enticed to do that. Like that's a guy that I've really had my eye on probably for like a year and a half, but Danny Ainge is asking for the farm for it. So I know that's probably not going to happen. And it just feels like he's not really serious. Like if a team's going to give him like 3 first, he might do it. But I do want to like give a name for free agency. I'm looking at a guy, and I know it's not like a star player, but I think he could help the Pistons offensively, and that's Gary Trent Jr. He's only 25. He could shoot the shit out the ball. Seems like every time he plays the Pistons, he drops like a 30 piece. Like Gary Trent Jr. is a guy that I think at the guard, I know we have a lot of guards, but like whether you want to start him, whether you want him to come off the bench, maybe play that Alec Burks role because he is a lot younger. He's only 25 years old. That's a guy I would look at. But I don't even know what the Pistons would do with the top 5 pick. Like I'd assume they would draft best available talent. We've seen what that's gotten them into. I just find it really hard to believe Troy Weaver would trade a top 5 draft pick because I just haven't seen him do it yet.
Yeah, and that doesn't. It seems like you have a guy like Troy, which, despite whatever you want to say about his picks, some picks, he looks at it, the draft as an opportunity for him. Like that's his specialty. So maybe he doesn't. I prefer he does. I prefer you trade that top 5 pick. And again, if you're going to trade it, you have to have a suitor. I don't know who that is, but preferably you trade it. But we'll see what happens. I can see a situation in which you're right, where he does not, and he takes a player, and guess what? Good luck getting Pistons fans to buy in after that, unless he's one of the best rookies we've seen in the last decade. I don't see it.
Yeah, it's just I know a lot of Pistons fans are falling in love with the idea of Alex Sarr, but I just think Alex Sarr is going to be a top 2 pick. I think it's between him and Ron Allen. I think that's probably going to be your number 1 overall pick. And then you have to take into account who Eric Tellum represents, and he represents another G League guy that's a top 5 pick, so that you kind of have to connect the dots, and you're like, oh well, if Eric Tellum represents a top 5 pick, that's probably who we're going to draft. Because I mean, I'm sure you remember this Servetus bullshit. Like we had a 2nd round pick when we drafted him because Eric Tellum represented him. With the draft, I know someone had asked me, like, who am I looking at in the draft? Like, I haven't even got into it. I just, it's hard for me to get into it because it's like, I was on the Brandon Miller train till the cows come home. Like everyone in this chat could tell you, I was hyping up Brandon Miller. I wanted the Pistons to draft Brandon Miller. I thought he could be the guy, but now we get 5th. I was telling people about the Thompson twins. I was like, be on the lookout for Amin and Nassar. They'll probably be top 5 picks. But I just can't get into it. I just, it's 5 years of this shit, dude. Like I can't do it anymore. Like I just don't care. Like I don't care.
Yeah, especially this. It's really, for me, I love draft time for all sports. It's something I just love to do. Yeah. But it's hard. It's hard to cover the Pistons and go into the draft. It's like this shit again. Top 5 pick again. Like that's frustrating. I don't have as much enthusiasm about doing it, but I'll definitely get into it as the season closes out. I'll do my deep dives.
Yeah, people are calling me out my bad takes. I love it. Because I said Scoot would be a generational talent.
I like Scoot too. I love Scoot coming out. It's really the rookie. I mean, I like Taylor Hendricks coming out. And look at him. A lot of DMPs for him. So
yeah, I was.
You hit some, you miss some.
I was a big Keontae George guy. And people are like, dude, we have enough guards. Stop.
Yeah, same thing. I mean, it was kind of like me with Shaden Sharp the year Ivey came out. Like that was my man crush, and I love Shaden Sharp. He's a stud.
Yeah. Like I said, he's gonna be good. Like the guy is just so athletic.
A pure scorer.
It's insane.
Pure scorer.
It's absolutely insane. But I do want to give you the opportunity to tell people about your podcast again. I know there have been a lot more people have joined since the beginning of the podcast, but tell people where they can find your podcast and what it's all about.
Yeah, so we're a live show, mostly Lions right now. I know we'll be getting into Red Wings with Gentry. He used to cover he still does, covers the Red Wings. But mainly a Lions, Red Wings, Pistons, Tigers, everything on that podcast. It's Crunch Time with Jeff Iafrate and Booner. You can find it on our YouTube channel, Crunch Time with Jeff Iafrate and Booner. We're live weekdays, 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. We have content posted throughout the day, every single day. I'm going to start coming out with something soon on Sundays, actually, where I'll be going live just for an hour to talk with people. So a lot of things get planned there. I mean, you could be a member. We're on all podcast platforms except for Apple because they're being bitches. So we got to figure that out. But everything else, we're on every other platform. And we just got to keep pushing. You can follow us on all social media as well at official CT Pod. That's on everything. TikTok, I think, is official Crunch Time, but everything else is at official CT Pod. So appreciate you for having me on, man. You're my guy. And we got to do this again. Have to.
Yeah, for sure. If I had to guess, Spencer, but
that's hey, now that I'm not there, that's up to them. They're grown men. You make their own decision. I love those guys. They support me. I support them. But yeah, I'm curious. I don't know.
Same here. Yeah, maybe
it's fun being on the outside because I don't give a shit. Now I'm just like, hey, whatever you got to do, man. You know,
plus 200. Put a bet spread on it.
Yeah, Maz is plus 3,500. I think he's probably, I love that man. But he's staying.
Shout out to Maz, man.
Shout out to Maz. He's the GOAT. He really is. Yeah,
but
that's okay.
If you guys do want to follow any of Jeff's YouTube channel, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, it's in the description below. All you have to do is click the link. It'll take you straight to it. But I appreciate you coming on. We finally did it after a year.
Yes, sir.
If you do talk Pistons, I want to invite.
Oh yeah. I got the goats lined up. I got my contacts with my Pistons contacts. Dude, we got it. We got the coverage down easily. I can't wait. We'll get you on for sure.
Man. For sure, man. Appreciate you guys watching live. We will see you guys next Sunday. Won't be able to do a Wednesday episode because I have to cover 10 games this week. So yay me. But catch you guys next Sunday. Hope you guys are staying safe and see you guys then. Peace.